My name is Daryl DeWald. I would like to begin this afternoon with our land acknowledgement of America's First Peoples. Washington State University acknowledges that its locations statewide are on the homelands of Native peoples who have lived in this region from time immemorial. The university expresses its deepest respect for and gratitude towards these original and current caretakers of the region. As an academic community, we acknowledge our responsibility to establish and maintain relationships with these tribes and with Native peoples in support of tribal sovereignty and the inclusion of their voices in teaching, research, and programming. Go ahead. So I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today. This is an opportunity to hear from President Schultz, so a thanks to Kirk for being here today. He is going to present for a few minutes. It will be about 20 or 25 minutes, I believe, which provides a lot of opportunity for us to then move into some of the pre-submitted questions or questions that you would like to ask him. I also want to thank Phil Weiler for being here today. Here's our VP for Marketing and Communications. In addition, some of the team that has come with him. I want to thank them for setting this up. I am now going to go ahead and turn this over to President Kirk Schultz.
Great, thank you. Well, good afternoon. Great to be here. I think last week was, I think I did a 4-campus week. I was in Pullman, then I was in Vancouver, I was in Everett, Seattle, and Spokane. So this week's a little more calmer. I'll be here for a few days. I'll be around tomorrow, then in Pullman for a little while, and then actually Tri-Cities this next week. So it's been fascinating. I've done the sort of system president thing now for nearly 2 years. To be able to spend so much time out in the state around each of our campuses. And a lot of folks don't have that opportunity necessarily. Maybe you visited one campus or another. But I'm always struck by how each campus is uniquely different. We're all Cougs, all crimson and gray, but there's just a different style and culture at each particular place. And it's hard to really get a sense for that on doing 1 or 2 visits. After several years, you start to get just a little bit of a different flavor. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here today, talk a little bit about some things happening at the system level. I only have about 6 slides today, so we won't have an extensive PowerPoint presentation. We have some excellent questions submitted in advance, and so want to make sure we have plenty of time to spend on the questions and things that you have. So what I want to do today is talk a little bit about the Pac-12. Whether you're a sports fan or not, at least that's a question on a lot of people's minds. My mom lives here in Spokane, and every time I see her, she's read all these wonderful newspaper articles about it, and sometimes she clips them out and gives them to me in case I haven't seen them. So we'll talk a little bit about the Pac-12. Stabilizing enrollment across the system, some of the progress we've made on that in the last year. Partnering for success, talking about some of the partnerships, advancing WSU Spokane, and then we'll have some time for some questions. So the future of the Pac-12 conference. This has really been, I have a booklet, a book on how to be a university president. And every time one of these things comes up, I look for the chapter, and I can't find it in there. So there really is no precedent for what has happened with the Pac-12, where literally on a Friday, interestingly, I was camping in Colorado at the time, looking for campgrounds with cell signal. And we went from Washington and Oregon leaving that morning to, by the afternoon, an additional 3 schools had left, and there was only 4 of us left. Then over the next month or so, I think everybody saw Cal and Stanford kind of desperately hoping for that ACC, Atlantic Coast Conference invite. And then now we're down to Oregon State and Washington State in the conference. So we're looking at some partnerships. I think we've been pretty upfront that we're considering and talking with the Mountain West Conference about partnerships and things like that. An interesting thing about the Mountain West is they currently have 5 land-grant schools. If Oregon State and Washington State were part of the Mountain West, they have 7. And so when you look at institutions that are very similar to us and what types of academic things we do, the roles that we play in our state, land-grant institutions, and the history. There's really some nice parallels there academically as well. But one of the things that we want to do is the Pac-12 has some assets, and that includes future revenues coming in around basketball and some other types of things. And so what we want to do is spend some time making sure we know what those things are going to be. So the tradition in the Pac-12 has been if you left the Pac-12, you were no longer on the board of directors. We've done that a long time. The lawsuit that we filed really just basically said the practice is if you don't announce you're leaving and you're left, that constitutes the board of directors. So Oregon State and Washington State say, we believe the governance model for the board should be the two schools that are still remaining in the conference get a chance to make decisions on the fiscal affairs and these different types of things. And so that's what the lawsuit's all about. And we were pleased with the verdict that came down, at least a temporary restraining order. We're now having conversations with the other schools to see if we can reach some sort of middle ground on how this would all work ahead. So I think when it first happened, I was in Pullman and somebody asked me if they should sell their house because, and this was not a joke, they just said, well, that's going to devastate the entire institution not being in the Pac-12 conference anymore because we'll have to shut down colleges and do things like this. And this person was absolutely concerned about their family's welfare. So what I was able to do in some of the communications have been, we don't believe this is going to have any significant effect on academic budgets at any particular campus or any of our colleges. What role it'll have in undergraduate student recruitment depends on what side of the spectrum we're on. Some people say, boy, that athletics and where your teams play is the reason that people come to a school. You'll have others on the other side that say people don't even pay attention to it at all. It's certainly part of the dynamic on students making decisions about where they would go. I don't think it's the most important thing. I don't think we can dismiss it totally. But we have an opportunity to make sure that we tell our undergraduate students, especially on the Pullman campus, that guess what? You're still going to have this fantastic collegiate experience. The National Science Foundation, NIH, do not have a place on their grant applications for athletic conference. We are going to continue to be a strong academic institution like we have been for decades. And so I think what's happened is people have calmed down a little bit. They're waiting to see what happens. And I want to just ask everybody for the same thing. Patience is really important. Everybody wants an immediate answer. Not everybody, but a lot of people do. Our fans do. And we've just got to go through a clear decision-making process so we get all the data and information and we say, here's what we're going to be doing next. People don't go, you're too hasty, you're too fast, you didn't get enough information, there's no reason to be fast here. Let's be deliberative. So we'll continue to work through this probably once every 4 to 6 weeks. I'll try and put out something to the university community about where we are with this. Don't take silence as meaning that we're not doing anything. Also, I would avoid using X or Twitter, whatever you like to call it, as your main source of information about conference affiliation. So my wife is on that more than probably she needs to be, and she'll text me, oh, you won't believe what's out there today. And I'll go, yeah, you're right, I won't believe what's out there today. But it's, if you have questions, concerns, always reach out directly to myself, and I'm happy to attempt to answer those if I can. So we'll go through this, we'll get to a good point, and I think at the end of the day, we want to be in a place that our student athletes have a great place to compete, that we have a chance to win championships, that we have a fiscally responsible athletics budget that we can fund on a regular basis, and that we don't have an off year where all of a sudden everybody's scrambling on where we're going to find money. So I think it's a chance for us to reset a little bit and make sure that we're doing the right thing for the institution. So, and if people have other questions on this during Q&A, happy to do that. We've worked really, really hard, and I say we, our admissions teams on all of our campuses to really work on stabilizing enrollment. This last year, we saw, and here, we saw a little bit of decrease, but we also saw an increase in some master's and doctoral students on campus. If we look system-wide, this year we had 2 of our campuses that actually not only had the largest entering class that they've had in many, many years, but their total enrollment went up. That was Tri-Cities and Everett. So we're starting to see, we think we've hit the bottom. We're starting to see that go back up. And there's still market forces out there. I know our colleagues in pharmacy and pharmaceutical sciences, that's a national issue, and WSU has not been immune from those same sort of national trends. We're more creative as an institution than we were even 2 years ago on what we're doing to recruit undergraduate students to WSU. We're showing up in more career fairs. We're doing direct admission. You sit there, you've got a certain set of credentials, we'll meet you on the spot. We're using our research and extension centers also as recruitment tools. And if we've got a whole set of new things that we're going to be doing this next year. So I don't want anybody thinking, well, we went up just because we got lucky. We went up because people worked really, really hard, tried some new things, making sure that we're going out and talking about WSU. Finally, U.S. News & World Report, we went up this year back into the top 100 public universities. You know, presidents are interesting people, believe it or not. We are normally, especially if we had something to drink. But if you get presidents sitting around and rankings come up, there's not a single president will talk that they think these things mean much. What's interesting then is when they come out, if you went up, you know, every president, including the ones that trashed them, are like, oh my God, we're finally recognized how great we are. And you'll see institutions that, you know, Vanderbilt was a good example this time, went down like 5 spots, and they sent out all this stuff about how terrible the rankings were and things. I just want to remind everybody, I don't believe our worth is defined by what U.S. News & World Report or pick your favorite niche.com. There's all these. We need to make sure that we feel good institutionally about where we're going, how we're serving our students. Do our faculty have the options to do research and scholarly work and excel the way they would like to? Do our staff feel supported? U.S. News & World Report, whether we're number 10 or number 200, shouldn't be how we value ourselves. So I applaud the fact that it's nice that we're there and we say, hey, we did this nice jump. But at the same time, I think it's just, I want to remind everybody, we need to have a certain set of things that we are doing institutionally in the health sciences, making sure that we are producing the next generation of workforce in rural and underserved areas. That was here before I was here. Hopefully it's going to be here long after I'm here. This doesn't change that, and I just think it's really important for us to just keep these in some perspective. This last year, almost $168 million in philanthropy to WSU. We broke our record from last year, about $155 million. We have a great set of deans, chancellors, development staff that are out there doing a really, really nice job. You all as faculty and staff, when you talk about your needs, guess what? Our job is to go out there and match those needs up with people that are interested in supporting Washington State University. People tend to think there's some magic to this. A lot of it is just plain old-fashioned hard work. It's being willing to get on a plane and go fly somewhere to see somebody for an hour-long lunch. 2 years later, when they do a $10 million gift, you say, wow, that started because we were willing to go see somebody where they were and start a conversation. Most of this is just old-fashioned relationship building, talking back and forth about what somebody's interested in and us matching that up. That being said, one of my primary jobs is to make sure that number is as large as possible and hopefully continues to go up each year, which means I have to be working with our chancellors, deans, and others on our really high net worth individuals. Folks, there are WSU Cougs that are billionaires that came from the state, went to WSU, got an undergraduate or graduate degree, and have gone out and done amazing things. And it's important that we're in front of those folks, talking to them about their passions and ways that they can make a difference in our institution. So I think you're going to continue to see some really nice, large gifts come in that are naming colleges, that are going to name departments and programs, that will do endowed professorships and large scholarship programs. We're going to continue to push that envelope because that's really important. But what that means, though, is sometimes Mark's not going to be in his office when everybody needs to see him. And everybody's, where's Mark? Well, he's over talking to folks in Seattle or whatever he needs to, or Daryl or Kirk. And I think just as a reminder, people don't tend to show up, walk in our office with their checkbook and say, I'm ready to write a check. It'd be nice when they do that. That happens occasionally. Most of the time, it's lots of time spent in glamorous Starbucks coffee shops, places like that, just having conversations about what we're doing, why it's important, and how people can help us. We had a really excellent year with the Washington legislature. Obviously, the new medicine building, or new to us medicine building, was a really strategic step by Daryl and our team a couple years ago, recognizing that we go to the legislature, get some renovation money to take that building and make sure that it was, what we needed right now for medicine, nursing, and pharmacy on our particular campus. We got $7 million to design a new team health education building. One of our goals that we have at WSU is that any money we get from the state, we're always going to look to match that philanthropically. I don't always mean a one-to-one match, but new engineering building on the Pullman campus, $40 million from the state, $40 million from donors. Our Vancouver life sciences building, that one's going to probably be $7 to $8 million from donors, and the majority of it coming from the state. So it's not all 50-50, but it's important that we take these projects and go out there and try and match them up. So when myself, Daryl, and others go and talk to our elected officials, we say, hey, you know that dollar you invested in us? We went out and got some private dollars on top of that, so we had a bigger facility or better furnishings or more equipped labs or whatever that needs to be. We're going to continue to do that. So looking forward to fundraising and working with you all on this team health education building. And I hate the name of it, by the way. I've challenged Daryl. It's got to be something better than that. So, we're going to keep working forward. We've already got some folks that have invested heavily in this campus and in the 3 colleges that I think are interested in us taking that next step. So I look forward to continuing to go out there in those Starbucks coffee shops and see if we can't just have a first-class facility for simulation for all of our different units on this campus. A Native American scholarship program, and it's interesting how persistence makes a difference. We talked with a representative about doing this. She put it together. It didn't advance out of committee. She just was persistent. Zoe and the whole Native American team was persistent, and she wound up finding a way to get some money for 2 years for a pilot. WSU is the only school that received those kind of resources, and so it's an opportunity for us to lead in the state and show what we can do and how those our relationships with the tribal partners can make such a big difference. Nursing salaries were a problem. I realize they still are. We were able, though, to go and get a special allocation to raise our nursing salaries here. We need to continue to look for those kind of opportunities with the legislature when we see those. We also continue to, as we get these new degree programs, and you read about something from me, hopefully you read it occasionally, at least glance at it. We've gotten somewhere around, over the last 8 years, about 100 new tenure track positions at WSU through legislative advocacy. Now that includes 57 in medicine as we went and got the money to establish the College of Medicine. But we're going to continue to do that. If you see a new degree program proposal, we are trying to put tenure track research active faculty lines in there so that if we add new degree programs, you all have a chance to go get some colleagues and bring them in, and we've put enough dollars in there to be able to do that. Finally, in terms of federal funding, we're in a point, we got a couple-year window. I know the federal government can be slightly dysfunctional, but we have a very, very strong delegation right now on both the Republican House side, the Democratic side in the Senate, the Democratic side in the House, both ways. And they have put money in for earmarks for, we call them congressionally directed funding, but essentially they're earmarks. And for different projects and things like that. They'll fund new instrumentation and do different things in different campuses. So this continues to be important. Patty does a lot of work here to make sure that the health sciences are well represented at the state. local and federal level, and I think we're going to continue to do those things. The difference is, when I was at 2 universities ago, that was sort of the days when we talk about, pork barrel projects or those kind of things that, is the bridge to nowhere type of time frame. Congress, in a good way, doesn't do those things anymore. Every project we ask for, we could have the front page of the Spokesman Review or the Seattle Times, and everybody go, that's a great project. That's the type of thing is we want to make sure we're putting forward things that average folks will look at and say, this is important to our state, to our region, to our city, to our campus. And so when we do those, they're carefully vetted, work with a lot of leadership on all of our campuses to make sure they're the right things. So I appreciate all the work that continues to go on here. I had a chance to visit with Daryl and reflect a little bit over the course of this last year. I mentioned the nursing salaries and some of the legislative successes. We had our pediatrics residency program announcement. We have a renovated building. We've got dollars for a new building. We continue to just see this progress. And those of you who work in the healthcare space know that the healthcare industry is exceedingly complex. Dealing with Boeing, making an airplane, I'm not saying that's simple, but that's, as an engineer, I can get that. The healthcare space, dealing with different competing hospitals and insurance companies and all that, Daryl and all of you in the room are doing a real nice job building those partnerships. And our folks on the other side of the state, they're terrific. They're world-class in a lot of what they do. But if you talk to some of these organizations, they say if they want a partnership, they're going to come to WSU because we'll sit down and say, what do you need? How can we work together? Not, here's what you got, and you better take it or leave it. And I think that's a strength that this campus and this set of folks have here that is really important to us, and we can't lose that because people see us as wanting to sit down and problem solve together, and that's a different way than perhaps others operate. So with that, I told you it was just a few slides. I look forward to answering some questions either from you all or that were submitted in advance. And thank you all for being here and all the great work that you continue to do. So with that, Phil.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Phil Weiler. I'm the Vice President for Marketing and Communications. I'm going to be our moderator for the Q&A portion. As President mentioned, we do have a number of questions that were pre-submitted, but since you all are here, we want to hear from you as well. So I have a microphone. I will go around the room. Just raise your hand if you have a question. And just so that you know, we are recording this, so I know people don't like using microphones, but we need to be able to hear your voice. So I've got one here and one there, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Oh, even better. The mic is on.
Thanks, Kirk. With the Pac-12, there's the Pac-12 Biomedical Research Program. Do you have any ideas what's going to become of that? And I'll put in a plug. It would be great if only WSU and Oregon could apply to that going forward.
Yeah.
And the level
Yeah,
stayed constant.
Yeah. So, John, thanks. There's a lot of things that the conference did that have been sort of good things supporting the academic part of sports and the 12 universities that were members of it. The fact of the matter is we don't have a contract past, July 31st from a set of media companies. In other words, that income coming in is essentially goes down to zero. And so I think there's some of those projects that have been really, really good. Some of the diversity work that has come out of the Pac-12 has been exceptional and meaningful on all of our campuses. I don't know how long those things will go. However, this is all part of our governance conversation is who makes a decision on who gets access to certain pools of resources. And, I think we can submit 10 applications, 9 should be WSU. We'll let Oregon State have 1 and it's all good. So, yeah.
All right, well, while Daryl's running the mic over, I'm going to ask one of the pre-submitted questions. Kirk, you talked a little bit about the success that we had in the legislature this year. This person's asking about something that we didn't quite hit what we were hoping for. This person says that classified staff received a 4% wage increase this year. The legislature, however, did not fully fund 4% increases for faculty and administrative professionals. These groups received 2.5% increase instead. So the person's asking, where does compensation stand as we go back to the legislature looking for funding in the future?
Yeah, it's a great question, and certainly one that's on a lot of people's minds. So the legislature, when they provide us dollars, and I apologize if this, will seem like a little digression, but when they announce that there'll be a 4% pool or whatever, they don't actually give us the 4%. What they do is they do something called a funding split, where they give us a certain percentage of that. They don't necessarily announce it that way, but that's typically the way it does. And it's roughly for WSU, I think we get about 67% of what a raise will be from the state. And for our non-represented faculty and staff, essentially we have to come up with the rest. That comes out of tuition increases or other types of dollars. They don't care where we find it. So in past years, we've actually sometimes initiated cuts across units and taken some of those dollars and put it back in the salary pool. People are glad to get the salary increase. Nobody likes the cuts to the particular units. So one of the solutions is, can we get the state in the future to fund 100% of what the raises are instead of this split? University of Washington, for example, their split is 60-40. Ours is that they get 60%, have to come up with 40. So this week, Monday, the council presidents met, which is the 6 public university presidents and our staffs. And people across the state have been concerned about salaries or not keeping caught up with inflation and the rising cost of goods and services. You all know this at home. So everybody listed salaries as their number one priority this last legislative session. Well, I shared with you all the other kind of things. So the presidents are discussing, what about if in the next major session, not the short session coming up this year, but the next major one in the biennium, what about if we submitted one request? We said, we got one item, and that's move us to 100% of what you would do and need to do to get our salaries where whatever you announce, you actually fund the whole thing. Now, this is really expensive, folks. Let me make that clear. Not just us, University of Washington. We're talking big numbers here to get that up there. Probably, for us, we estimate to get us 100% on top, and fund the 4 and 3 this last biennium would have been an additional $40 million. So it doesn't matter whether it's a lot of money or not. The community and technical colleges went. They were 87 and 13, 87% paid by the state, 13. They were able to successfully this last session get theirs up to 100%. So there's precedent setting to do that. The challenge becomes, if you put one item on your list and somebody chooses not to do it, everybody goes, well, the administration blew it. You should have had items B, C, and D. But if we're serious about that salaries and getting you all paid, which you should be paid, is our top priority, then, do we push all the chips, if you will, to the center of the table, and we say, this is what we think is really important. This only works well if all 6 publics do it, too. It can't be us doing that, UW doing something different, Central doing a third thing. So the presidents, we want to talk about this, not just internally, but with our government relations teams and others, and say, is this the strategy? Because what we're trying now doesn't seem to be working. We'll talk with an elected official about salaries and our number one priority. They'll nod their head. They go, yeah, we got it. And, on a 30-minute conversation, minute 6, they're like, tell us about this new thing. And so that's just the reality of where we are. So how do we actually make a fundamental difference and change in the way we do things? And I think that's what we're looking to do for that next major session. You say, well, Kirk, that's a long ways away. What happens is in December and January, we start talking about that with elected officials. And what you do is we tend to say, here's what we're thinking. Here's maybe what our strategy is. What do you think of that? And to get some feedback, because they don't have to vote on it then. They don't have to decide right then. But you'll get some, let's say, direct feedback on whether or not people think that would make a difference or not. So stay tuned. We realize that we're not doing what we need to in terms of salaries, but we're going to have to maybe shift our strategy a little bit to get something different than the way it's going now. So, sorry, nobody else will ask a question after a 20-minute answer. Yes.
No, this is sort of, I would suppose, related to that. I work in student support, and I know there's staff people all across all the colleges and student affairs. I'm in student affairs, who do stuff that's not faculty, and it's not like that upper level administration. So when you talk about new academic programs and hiring new faculty, and I ask this question every time anybody mentions a new program, what are we doing about the support staff there? Because faculty, obviously, have to have faculty to teach the classes, do the research. But the rest of us that work in other sort of aspects of student support, you add a program, you're adding student support outside of that faculty that direct instructional sort of aspect. How are we thinking about that? Because that's tied to salaries and whatnot too. And I don't know what's going on in every college and unit and everything, but I know that there are problems that we have with retention and recruitment. We have good people who want to stay, who feel like they can't. Good people who want to come here, who have to say no because reasons. So how is that tied up with the idea of expanding programs and adding new things and that sort of stuff? Because it's not, obviously you know this, but it's not just faculty.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think as we put together some of these proposals, we're getting more sophisticated in acknowledging those particular costs that I don't think we necessarily always did. So my wife, Noel, is going to be leading, I think you all saw this, new research center in the Tri-Cities. There are a bunch of staffs and support positions that were part of that. I can tell you some number of years ago it had been how many faculty are we going to get, and you forget about all the other pieces to make something be successful. So, however, the student support services part, which often would be kind of forgotten because it's not directly related to project A or B, as we get these new things funded, we've got to figure out some ways when we submit them to say, we're going to take some piece of this and it's got to go in some form or fashion to support these other areas of campus. So I appreciate you bringing it up. I think we understand it's there. Again, it's also understanding if we're going to do a new program in widget science, what's the real cost to do that? Not just the faculty in the classroom, but to the entire ecosystem. And we got to start budgeting in that particular form or fashion and not just go, we're fixing A and B, but we've made it worse in C and D because we've added load with no new resources. So we're getting better, and we'll just keep at it. So thank you.
Let me ask another question that was submitted. Last month in September, the WSU Board of Regents met, and one of the actions that they took was to consider the University of Nairobi as a potential WSU educational location. Can you offer the audience some details on what the goal of developing a larger footprint in East Africa might be, and what are some of the opportunities and perhaps some of the challenges of expanding our footprint beyond the continental U.S.?
Yeah, let me answer that in sort of two ways. And when Phil says prepared questions, I didn't prepare all these myself, and I give them to him. But most universities of our stature have clear things they do outside of the United States, whether it's a campus located somewhere or formalized programs. We have study abroad and all those kind of things, but to me, we had a little less of some of those things outside the United States and others that I would constitute our peers or aspirational peers. So when you go somewhere and you come in new, the first thing you got to do is kind of look around and say, what are people doing already? You know, you don't need me to go put a stake in the ground somewhere. And what we found is through the Allen School for Global Health that they've had a long-standing relationship in Africa. And they kept telling me, Kirk, you need to go and see what we're doing there. And I'd seen slides of research volume and all that kind of stuff. And I went a year ago, and I'm sitting around a room, and it's a big conference table, seats 18. And I said, oh, it's great. I look forward to meeting all these folks. You know, who are they and who pays them? Well, they're WSU employees in Nairobi. And then the next couple hours, we have a bunch of PhD students, about 20 PhD candidates come in. Where are these students? Are they University of Nairobi students? Well, yeah, they are, but they're co-advised and funded by Washington State University faculty. So you start going through all this kind of stuff, you say, we've got this big presence here that has been here for some time and is growing. Maybe let's make it a little more official and say, can we branch out from some of these other particular areas to journalism, to some of the other undergraduate opportunities for people to come and do study abroad, engineering and different things. Because guess what? There's a campus there. There's physical WSU staff there. We have a presence and some trust there. So this really kind of came down to, we've already got something there that may be a little under the radar. Let's bring it above the radar and see if we can't take something that's already really good and build upon it, as opposed to doing a greenfield thing where you say, okay, we're going to do something here. Kirk, where's that money going to come from? It's coming from somewhere else. We think they're incrementally building off of this real success makes a lot of sense for us. So I'm headed back there. We're looking, and Craig Parks is here and has helped us with the somewhat messy accreditation pieces of opening something like this up. And first you have to designate something as a teaching center. We got to go through an accreditation process to be sure we don't jeopardize accreditation for the institution by the president jumping the gun on something. And so we're just going through a very deliberative process with faculty governance, with other administrators, to make sure that when we do this and we say this is going to be important for us, that we've taken time and people go, hey, that's pretty cool. I think we've got a habit at WSU sometimes of people are aggressive and entrepreneurial, and they do wonderful stuff. And maybe we just don't publicize it very much. And then what happens is you bring it out, you put a light on it, and people go, why are we doing all this in Africa? Why are we doing all this in Yakima? Well, it turns out we've been doing it for quite a while in these different locations. We just sometimes didn't elevate and talk about it in the way that we need to. So sometimes when I'm asked, why are we doing this? Does this make sense on resources? Why are we doing something new? Sometimes I'll say, this has been going on for a long time. It was faculty-led. All we're doing is sort of saying, can we put some other resources around it so it has greater impact across all of our campuses? We're going to take another delegation of some academic deans and so on, going to go to Nairobi in Tanzania, meet some of our folks in November and December this next year. We certainly want active engagement of people on this particular campus to determine partnerships and things like that. Peter's here. He's been to University of Nairobi. There's some excellent universities in that area that want to partner with United States institutions, but they want to truly partner, not have us come in and tell somebody how to do something, and when a grant runs out, we disappear. If you're going to build relationships, you got to be there for the long run. And I think WSU is going to be one of the first places to have a joint doctoral degree where students graduate with WSU and University of Nairobi on the diploma. That's the kind of partnerships that we want to pursue. So, thank you.
Okay.
Did somebody else have a question? Yeah, right here.
A question that comes up in college conversations is parking costs. And I'm sure this is not an unfamiliar question for many of us here. I'm wondering if there's been any consideration on percent of salary that it costs for parking. Because the less you're paid, the more of your salary goes to parking. The more you're paid, the less it costs. So when parking costs over 1% of your annual salary, how is that being considered? Because yes, civil service got a higher raise than maybe AP and faculty this year, but so much of that percentage is now having to go to parking. And now it's likely that parking costs are also going to be considered to be increased because that increase expired this year. So how is that being considered at the state level when deans themselves, anytime we ask them, say, well, that's out of our hands, take it higher up. So bringing it here.
Yeah, I would truly kick that to somebody higher than myself if I could, but I would. So I think that's an excellent question. So a little bit of how we handle parking generally is that is a campus level decision. So parking rates for Spokane are not set in Pullman or anywhere else. That's done through the chancellor's office going to the Board of Regents. So if you have proposals on how you think that needs to be handled, and you mentioned that, you know, the current agreement is expiring, it's a great time to have a conversation about what that needs to look like or other ideas about what that could or should look like. But it is different on every single campus on how that works. Go ahead.
Would it ever be considered to be a set expectation across WSU on how they handle that? Or is it based on a campus by campus basis?
Yeah, and no, it's not going to be a system level decision because the cost of those, maintaining those, are not a system level thing. That's a campus responsibility. So what winds up happening is every campus makes that decision based on what it's going to cost them to operate those parking lots for a year. And I worry that we already have issues with how we determine what entry salaries are on staff positions based on cost of living in areas. This will turn into a real challenge because everybody will claim theirs costs more than the rest of the state does. So I think, but bring some proposals forward on what that could or should look like in your opinion, and we'll certainly work with Daryl and his team. I think Dan's here to at least give them consideration. By consideration, I don't mean it'll be a yes, but bring forward something and let's sort of take a look at it. End of the day, we got to cover the cost to operate the parking lots. I mean, that's there, and I would agree, higher salaried people got to pay more. So I think those two things together probably should be able to come up with a way to do it. I parked several other campuses and found my Pullman parking thing gets me ticketed everywhere else. So anyway, I contribute to this. Yes, go ahead. Question. Yes.
Oh, sorry. My name is David Garcia, and I work in the College of Medicine. My question is around Senate Bills 5227, 5228, 5229, which require the university to take certain actions and build particular infrastructure around diversity, equity, and inclusion, anti-racism. Absent an office for institutional diversity, whose responsibility or where are we making progress in these areas, and where can we find information about the progress that's being made?
A well-timed question. So I have a conversation with Lisa Guerrero this afternoon about this very topic, because I think at first we kind of pulled folks together, and now it's not clear, who is helping set institutional prioritization, things like that, and diversity, equity, and inclusive excellence. So we're going to try and clear that up a little bit. I think it's important for each campus to have their own set of clear leaders in this space. But if we're going to have a system, you would say there needs to be some system level stuff that's beyond just what we do at the campus level, sharing resources, policies, these types of things. So that's a step we need to take, and I believe this semester will make some nice forward progress in this. So I appreciate the question, David.
Thank you.
So I'd like to ask a question that was just.
And then we got one in the back too.
Okay.
So,
While the mic makes its way over, this was something that was submitted last night. This person was commenting on the fact that I think particularly during COVID, we've seen resignations. People talk about the Great Resignation. I think that certainly impacted WSU as well. This person was wondering, what steps is WSU taking to make sure that we retain valuable employees, that we increase morale? We talked a little bit about competitive salaries. Any thoughts on that idea of people resigning and the efforts to try and retain folks?
yeah, and I think that was also part of the question we had earlier was also focused around this. This is a challenge for any organization right now. When I talk to people in banking, other things in our community, we are not alone in challenges with retention, morale, and those types of things. I tend to think, because I'm in higher education, that we live in this bubble and it's only us. And I talk to people in all these diverse industries, and they're going through the same exact thing. I think we're going to continue to try and make sure that we're executing on some positive messaging. I looked last year and asked myself, what if I looked at Kirk's messaging to the community just over the course of the year, it was almost always, here's a problem, and here's what we're going to do. Here's another problem, and here's what we're going to do. And if you just read those standalone, you would say, I'm not sure anything good's happening at the university, because all we ever get is, this is an issue and here's how we're addressing it. So I think part of morale is also, we just can't claim everything's better and everybody goes, oh, see, it's better now because somebody said that. But I also think it's important that we celebrate our successes a little bit more as an institution, as a campus, as a group. Now, we have challenges, and we need to acknowledge those and work together to jointly problem solve. But I think we got to balance, I've got to balance my communications a little bit more. We've got a new one coming out, hopefully sometime in the next week or so, that talks about some of our successes just around buildings and things that we've done on all of our campuses. So I want to make sure that the senior leadership is conveying a sense of positivity, but we're also not stick your head in the sand positivity, acknowledging areas we got to improve, but I want people going home and saying, there's some cool stuff happening where I work and I'm part of it, and not always there's a challenge or there's an issue. We have to, I mentioned the salaries. I think salaries are important. We need to do better. You all deserve better. I think I've learned through a 15-year career being president that we'll bust our rear ends to get as big a salary increase as possible, and 2 weeks later, people will go, we still got morale issues. So I want to, salary, people need to feel that they're valued and their paycheck reflects what they're doing and they're valued. I think if everybody thinks that we just do big pay raises, that all of a sudden morale shoots way up. I think it's a piece of it, but it's not exclusively everything that's there. So better communication, I think making sure we're prioritizing salaries, making sure that we're acknowledging our challenges, but also let's celebrate those great things when they happen. And there's a lot of great things that are happening, and making sure that we're ensuring flexibility in the workplace. I've read a lot of stuff in higher education stuff that we made this progress coming out of COVID, much more flexible in the workplace. I don't mean just working at home, just people had a little more grace, right? And then you've watched a year and a half later, and man, we're going right back to a lot of the ways that we did things before pre-pandemic, where somebody goes, well, I got this happening. Well, you better have your butt in the office, man, because that's what we got to do now. We just got to restore a little bit of that grace that I think existed after COVID in our workplace, so that people go, I may not have as much money as I want, I may not see everything I want, but there's these other pieces to it that make up or that partially compensate for where it is, and we should be able to do that organizationally. The other thing that I appreciate this question filed in advance, and Phil cleaned it up a little bit. There was a sense of, we have all these people resigning now. So we actually went back and I asked Teresa Elliott Cheslick, our vice president, to pull numbers. And 2 years ago, clearly, when everybody was moving around, there was more resignations at WSU than we would normally have. Last year, we were back to pre-pandemic levels. That's, roughly about 1,000 people changed jobs out of roughly 8,000 to 8,500 in the database. That was the pre-pandemic. That's what it was this last year. So this idea that we have more people leaving now than we did a year or two ago, the data doesn't support that. And boy, a couple years ago, it seemed like every other week somebody was leaving and moving, and I've got children, grown children, and they were like, hey, I'm tired of this job. I'm like, you've been there 8 months, but that was a little bit of the culture. And if you read in the news media today, Wall Street Journal had an article that hiring is slowing down in industry. People aren't moving as much. People, I think, are worried about the economy, and they want to make sure they've got a good, stable work environment. So we just got to make sure that we value you all for what you're doing appropriately. We express that both with monetary compensation, you feeling part of the solution, and appreciated for the work that you do. So, it's easy for me to say that. We just got to make sure that those actions speak louder than words. So we had a question back here, I think.
This is on a related note. I'm Amy, I'm Chair of Speech and Hearing Sciences. And as I'll say, relatively new chair, I'm always trying to figure out how our department can be part of the solution. And in that, I look at, okay, here's the budget model. All right, so where's our autonomy to do better with this budget model? For example, getting more students. Well, under the current model, it's not really incentivized. I wanted us to expand to the Tri-Cities campus. We desperately need more speech-language pathologists in that part of the state. It is part of a land grant mission. Yet every time we crunch the numbers, it doesn't always add up. It doesn't make sense. So I guess I'm wondering, how does department autonomy or college autonomy ever get factored in when trying to come up with a university budget model, which I can imagine is a brutal task. But these are the things that I've been up against, and And I think autonomy is also something that helps with morale. Like, hey, okay, we came up with a solution. We can help. But then when I come back and I look at the numbers with finance, I go, nope, that won't matter because the way things are. I'm like, that's a challenge. I hope that was clear. It was.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I've worked at 3 land grants as a senior leader, and all of them had the same crappy historical budget model, right? I wanted to always transport myself back to 1965 when they figured out who was going to get what, because it was just sort of incremental. We get another 3% or 2% or whatever. Everybody got the same thing, and almost no focus on growth or getting smaller, any of the above. It was all historical. I think the effort that Elizabeth Chilton as our provost and others led to try and redefine that was a good start. And then when Leslie Brunelli came in, she said, hey, this is wonderful, but we don't have Workday integrated enough with our current money that we have to be ready to take this step. We're just going to make a mess out of it. So I think I know that we have a focus on wanting to make sure that we have a clear idea of how can we grow a program, where's dollars available, how is that accounted for, where do I apply to get some of these resources? I think that's 18 months away. Just because I don't want to be unrealistic and say, oh, it's going to happen immediately, and you see me in 6 months ago, I'm still waiting. But I think what we want to do is this year, and I apologize if this is too in the weeds, but Leslie talked about we need a core funds budget for the institution, and make sure that's in Workday, people see it, everything closes on time, all those financial details, that was step one. And once we have that, then we look at running a parallel type of new budget model alongside that. But this year originally was going to be the year we did that. And when she got here, she looked at things, she looked at her own staffing, she talked to some of the folks who've been there a while. She said, if we're not careful, we're just going to make a mess of it. So she probably put it more eloquently than I am. But I think we recognize that is a challenge. Daryl talks about that's a big challenge here, specifically for this campus, more so than some of the other campuses. So we know it's there. We're working on solving it. I just we want to do this carefully so that we don't screw it up and you go, I'll go back to the old method because at least I knew what I had. And it's going to take us some time to do that.
So I will echo what Kirk just said. Leslie Brunelli, for those of you who don't know, is our Executive Vice President for Finance and Administration. Leslie worked at a university that adopted the budget model we were looking to adopt, and she was at the university when that budget model failed. So I think it's actually helpful to have someone who's gone through an unsuccessful implementation of a budget to say, all right, here's what we need to have in place if this is going to be successful. And I think, honestly, the worst thing that could happen is that we completely throw things up in the air and say we're adopting this new model and then have it not work. So as much as I think we would all love to be able to get to a place to say, we know what the process is going to look like, it makes sense for us to make sure that we've done the work up front and we're prepared to make that change, because it will be a significant change. And one of the things the president didn't mention is that we've got these different campuses that were stood up at different times in our history. Not every campus has the same budget model, and so that's a challenge as well. Just it's messy, I guess, and so I think Leslie really wants to make sure we clean up the mess and we're clear about what we're doing and have the data we need to be able to make good decisions before we sort of jump off a cliff and try something different. So,
Thank you.
Other questions from the audience? Yeah.
This probably needs to be the last one, too.
Just so others can hear.
Thank you. I know you've heard this question before, and I think it's important that we continue to surface it to you. Here in Spokane, we lose staff to Gonzaga University because they offer tuition reimbursement. And so we train people up for a few years, and the next thing you know, they're out the door. And we ask them, why are you leaving us for Gonzaga? They say, well, I'd like to get my degree paid for. So again, I know you've heard this before, sir, but this comes up in every single staff meeting that we have. Is there a plan to discuss some type of tuition reimbursement for people outside of Pullman to pursue higher education degrees?
Yeah, yes, there is. Dave Soleil for the Global Campus Chancellor and I have had some discussions the last couple weeks about a scholarship program. If we just open it up completely, that means any state employee can take it, and that could create all kinds of issues. But this continues to come up, is how do we do this, especially for people out, even in Pullman, it comes up all the time. People will go, I know I can physically go, but guess what, I got a full-time job, and I can't go do it that way. Can I have access in the same form and fashion to online, kind of classes? And so I'm hopeful to have something to present by the end of the year. Not academic year, by November, December, on how we're going to do it. So we're committed to try and do it. We know it comes up all the time. And this, again, feels like one of those things, man, you should be able to solve this, Kirk. I mean, I look in the mirror, how hard can this be? And we'll need to, but I do think we're going to make some progress.
Thank you.
So, thank you. All right. Well, folks, thank you for coming, and thanks for being here. Thanks for the attention. For those who happen to watch the video, hopefully you've got a nice adult beverage you're enjoying while watching this on YouTube. But I appreciate everything that you all do on this campus. I'm excited by our future here. I love the collaborations we're seeing between medicine, nursing, pharmacy, pharmaceutical sciences. I just think the future is really, really bright, and I appreciate all that you all do to make that possible. Thank you, and go Cougs.